Guitar solos. You gotta love them. Who doesn't? I know I do. I grew up with guitar music. Grew up a rock and roll boy. Well, more of a nu metal boy, but you get my gist. I listened to guitar music growing up, and I've heard hundreds and hundreds of excellent guitar solos, and I've looked online at all the lists of all the best guitar solos out there. And while I love a great shredding, heavy guitar solo as much as the next guy, one that's just a bunch of flashy, cool sounding shit, I really feel like a lot of guitar solos bleed into each other. A lot of the ones that are celebrated, a lot of the best guitar solos are kind of samey. And so I decided to put together a list of the 10 guitar solos that I find the most memorable, the ones that stick out in my mind, the ones that really make the songs that they come from for me, and that I revisit time and time again. Number 10 on my list is the guitar solo from the song Rain, from the Cowboy Bebop soundtrack, composed by Yoko Kanno, this solo having been performed by Tsuneo Imahori, himself an anime composer. And this pretty much sets the tone just right for what kind of solos are going to be on my list. Mostly these sort of slower, meaningful solos, these ones that really grab at the heartstrings, where every note has to be chosen particularly. You know, when it comes to shredding solos, a lot of it is that high up on the guitar neck, you know, just like noodling away, that, you know, always kind of sounds the same. With these slower guitar solos, you really have the weight of every single note, and it feels like someone had to sit there and toil over just getting the exactly right emotion, going all over the guitar to find these sounds. And the song Rain is a great short example of that. It's probably like a 15-20 second long guitar solo. It's not very long, but it's got this raw emotional quality to it over this very simplistic song. Rain is a very stripped down track that is mostly just this repetitive organ chord being played over and over again with another organ chord progression over it, and like, yeah, it's like pretty bare bones aside from the emotional soaring vocals and this big guitar solo. And it plays during one of the most memorable scenes in the show Cowboy Bebop, in episode 5, when Spike is walking into a cathedral, and the song has like the exact atmosphere of a church. Like, this is a godly kind of song. It's got this bigness to it while also being very somber and serious in the fact that it's so stripped down. It's probably the most memorable guitar solo in an anime soundtrack, and granted, Tsuneo Imahori is a man who has done countless amazing guitar solos. He can do some epic shredding and shit. I would also be tempted to put the song from the Vision of Escaflowne soundtrack on there that he shreds on, but this solo from Rain had to be on here because, I mean, I've been listening to this song since I was a fucking kid, and I absolutely love this solo. Next up in a similar vein is the guitar solo from Bohemian Rhapsody. There are multiple big guitar parts in this song, in spite of the fact that it is not at all a guitar-driven song. In fact, it's mostly piano-driven. The guitar pretty much just comes in for big solo moments. Right after the first chorus is the really incredible solo that is just so memorable and solid that the song could imaginably have ended there. Like, you could imagine a version of Bohemian Rhapsody where it just rips out this fucking massive solo and then goes into another chorus iteration or the very end of the song, instead of having the minute and a half of insanity that then follows, though that's what truly makes this song such a fucking legend. But the fact that even, like, if you took out that, like, amazing crazy shit that happens in the middle of the song, there's still this legendary guitar solo right in front of that. Like, it's incredible to think about. I almost forget that this guitar solo even exists just because Bohemian Rhapsody has so much other stuff going on. Like, most songs that are known for the solo are known for the solo, but this one, even on all those top guitar solo lists, like, this always appears because it's just that good of a solo. Next on my list is my favorite guitar solo from one of the most celebrated rock guitarists of all time, John Frusciante of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, with the solo for Scar Tissue. This song actually has a bunch of small solos that are kind of building on one another throughout the track, but at the very end is when it finally goes into the big final one. This is the epitome of the extremely delicately chosen notes in in this solo. Every note lingers for a long time, and the tone of the guitar is so sorrowful and gorgeous, and he's going all over the guitar with each note. If you watch the music video, you can see him impressively playing this on a broken in half guitar, and still managing to find all the notes just right, which is a pretty fun video moment. But this solo really brings the whole track up to another level. Like, this song already has sort of a sorrowful tone to it, but it's really the guitar solo that tugs at the heartstrings. The lyrical content of the song, while it sounds sort of sad and shit, like, I don't really know what they're talking about, but when you hear those fucking notes, you understand exactly what the song is about. Next up on my list, for probably the most obscure solo on here, is the track You Laughed Like a Watermark by Boris featuring Michio Kurihara. I think that's his name. This comes from the album Rainbow, which is basically an album where Boris constructed a bunch of songs and then sent them off to this guitarist who just played crazy solos over the tracks in this incredibly high-pitched, shrill, noisy guitar. And it's a very interesting release, but my favorite track on there is You Laughed Like a Watermark, which is about 6.5 minutes of this very low-tempo, groovy, sad-sounding beat. It's sort of similar to Scar Tissue, actually, in tone, but with a much more watery texture to it and the sort of guitar tones that Boris uniquely uses. But then, all of a sudden, this searing AM radio sounding guitar comes in over it, ripping out these fucking awesome solos that really drench the track in pathos. This is another example of a song where you already get that it's a sad track, but when the guitar solo starts, that's when it becomes heart-wrenching. And this is a song I listened to a lot of times when I was feeling emotionally numb in my teen years, and, that solo really brought that to the forefront. Next up on my list is another somewhat odd choice, because this is not a song I immediately think of as a song with an amazing solo, nor a band that I think of as having amazing solos, but it's Little Lovers So Polite by Silversun Pickups. It's one of my favorite songs by this band. The whole thing has this sort of nighttime drive feel to it. It's got a slow but continuously driving rhythm, a sort of dancey tone to it in spite of being like a shoegaze track, and the whole thing has all these great vocal melodies and great lyrics, and it has a thick tone and atmosphere, but what really takes off towards the end of this track is this big fuzzy guitar solo, and the best thing about it is just the sound of it. It sounds just fuzz. Like, you almost can't hear like the individual notes or chords being played. It just sounds like a humming over the whole track. In fact, if someone told me that it's not even a guitar solo and it's a keyboard solo, I wouldn't be too surprised, but I think it's a guitar solo. It's got a very memorable melody to it. It sort of plays something vaguely similar to the melodies that were sung throughout the song, but with its own twists and turns, and it just really gets stuck in your head. I would say this is as memorable as any of the lyrics in the song are. It's just odd to think of it because the whole thing gels so smoothly that it doesn't feel like it breaks away to have a guitar solo in the way that a lot of songs do. It all just feels like part of the same track. I think that's pretty cool. Next on my list is why I wasn't quite able to limit this list to one per band, but I did try to limit it to one per guitarist, because I've got another Boris track on here, but this one is with the regular guitarist, Wata, who happens to be my favorite guitarist of all time. Her guitar tones sound so incredible. She can shred like a fucking beast. She comes up with the coolest fucking riffs, and she can do these incredibly emotional tracks as well. And Flood is an album that's just 1 hour-long track, which is all in this very sort of soft, contemplative sound, but with these building crescendos in places. It's a post-rock song in the crescendo course style, if that was like an entire hour of one track with one huge crescendo in it. Now, the part that I'm putting in my list is part 2, because the song is broken up into 4 parts on the album, and the second part is the one that has the most emotional solos on it. This whole part of the song is a very slow, drawn out, sort of sleep-inducing track. I mean, I used to listen to this when I go to bed all the time, and God, hearing it live was like being put into a trance. And arguably, there's soloing going on through the whole track. I mean, the lead guitar is playing sort of similar riffs to the rhythm guitar, except that it has all these little flourishes and random noodling thrown in, so it's hard to say which parts are like definitively solos or not, but there are parts that like where it really does solo, and I can't even pick a favorite. It's just the way that this song ebbs and flows throughout the course of it, the way that it goes between the more solo-y bits and the more repetitive bits, and it just kind of lulls you into this, again, like meditative state of mind. It's like if the song was just constantly repetitious, it would be too robotic, which is how the beginning of the Flood album is. The first track is this like incredibly repetitive hypnotic riff that really just like kind of pulverizes your brain, but track 2 combines that repetitiveness with the soloing, with the flourishes on the guitar, and that's what really brings it to life and makes it sort of sensual and human. But following from that, to keep up once again with the trend of the sad, somber, very contemplative guitar solos, we have the most famous of the lot, which would be the guitar solo from Comfortably Numb. This shows up on every list of the greatest guitar solos, and for great reason. This guitar solo feels comfortably numb. I fucking love this song. It's one of my favorites. Like the others I've talked about, it is thickly tonal, thickly sort of sad and atmospheric, but whereas some of these other songs have a little bit more emotional gravity, they feel more like they're somber or weepy. Comfortably Numb is more catatonic. It's more like I have nothing to feel anymore. It's about that absence of feeling, and the guitar solo has such an airiness to it where it goes into these soaring high notes while the violins going in the background. It feels like your soul's left your body, and you're not experiencing the soul's journey, you're experiencing the body's journey as it sits there soulless and just drinks in the surroundings, the flittering lights passing by, the memories vague in your mind that are all passing through. You know, it's a gorgeous track. It's a song that already has fantastic lyrics which are super evocative, but it's when the solo kicks in that you really get to reflect on those lyrics and let all of that sink in and like visualize yourself in this sort of position. I have had many times laying around feeling numb, putting on this song and vegging the fuck out. But to be perfectly honest, I didn't make this video so I could talk about any of those 7 guitar solos I just talked about. That was all the shit that once I had the idea for the video, I went and did research and like looked at what other people were saying and went through every song on my fucking computer to try to figure out which ones I thought had the best guitar solos. But these are the 3 songs that I wanted to talk about so badly that I made a top 10 guitar solos list. Starting with number 3, the one that gave me the idea in the first place when I was working on my Opeth worst to best video, which is Hours of Wealth. This song is almost just a 5.5 minute guitar solo. The first half of the song goes through a few different guitar passages and melodies, some of which are repeated, so I guess they could arguably be called riffs, but they're so incredibly long as riffs, like these are really lengthy melodies, and it's hard for me to consider them such. And they set this tone of being very dark and distant and lonely. This song feels like emptiness. It's very sparse. All that's in it are guitars and keyboards. The keyboards are adding a kind of jazzy flavor a little bit, but like a lounge jazz kind of thing, but the song maintains such a sparseness and such an emptiness that it really feels like cloyingly alone. When it gets into the middle, there's a vocal passage which is again very somber and cold and distant, and then we get into this guitar solo that's just absolutely magical. Every single note of it is beautiful. It's got this perfect combination of having that lonely feeling, that lonely dark emptiness, but also with a sense of flair, because it's kind of badass, because Michael Achterfeldt, the way he plays guitar just sounds like fucking cool. So you've got this strange mix of like virtuosic playing, but while creating this atmosphere of loneliness and despair. I think my favorite moment in this guitar solo is where there's just thrown in a couple of, I don't know, would they be considered power chords? He strums 2 chords, or 2 strings together for like 3 or 4 notes in the middle of this solo, and it just adds this extra layer of feeling to it at that moment, and he plays a little faster after that. It's just a very deliberately constructed guitar solo where every note feels like it's just in the right place. It's pretty fucking incredible. But this wouldn't be a proper top 10 guitar solo lists if all I talked about were sad, somber tracks. After all, most people like guitar solos for the badass shredding, and there are lots of solos with badass shredding that I do love, but there's one that really stands out in my mind above the rest, one that I always get excited for to this day, even though this is a band that no one respects, and probably I'll get shit for liking this song so much, but fuck it. Bat Country by Avenged Sevenfold. I'm not a fan of Avenged Sevenfold. I think that City of Evil was their only arguably good album, and even then, only about half the songs are really all that good, but Bat Country is fucking awesome. I think what sells me on this song so much is really that it's not much of a shredding song. In fact, they actually are playing fairly slowly. It's just that it's such a memorable set of melodies that they're playing. This song is sort of meant to have this dark descent into madness feel to it. It's meant to be like a drug trip kind of song. It's basically it's about fear and loathing in Las Vegas. So it's supposed to sound like fucking tripping in the desert and going straight down to hell. And the guitar solo captures that perfectly. Now, it's not to say that there aren't plenty of guitar solos that do that. I mean, Slayer are like the masters of guitar solos that just sound evil and are like screeching bats and shit like that. But Slayer guitar solos, while they sound face-melting and crazy, aren't really that memorable on like a note-for-note basis, I think. Whereas this Avenged Sevenfold solo, like every single note of it is so fucking memorable. It's just that perfect blend of like fun and memorable and cool while also being dark and kind of seedy. My only problem with this guitar solo is that this album is so badly produced that like the guitar tone sounds like shit. So even if it's the most memorable solo in the world, it's not the best sounding one. But nonetheless, I mean, I've been listening to the album since I was a fucking teenager, so I can kind of look past the production and just remember how fucking great the solo is. But my number one favorite solo of all time, which inevitably it had to be, it's probably the one I've listened to the most times, the one that I can easily sing along to all the way through, even though it's like 4 or 5 minutes long, is the guitar solo from The Final Cut by Coheed and Cambria. Now, Coheed and Cambria has tons of great guitar solos across their career, but this is the song where they just made a guitar solo song. Like, that's what the point of this is. It's to be a big, epic guitar solo at the end of a big, epic album. And it's pretty obvious that they were listening to a lot of Pink Floyd at the time, considering that there's tons of Pink Floyd references all over the album. The song is called The Final Cut, which is the name of a Pink Floyd album, and the guitar solo is clearly taking nods from Comfortably Numb and some of the other Pink Floyd solos. I don't care. I like this one more. I grew up with it. It's been with me for a long time. I've heard it a few hundred times, and I just think it's so fucking pristine. Again, this is another one where every note of it is memorable, even though this one doesn't feel like as deliberate as some of the ones I've talked about. Like, it just works. All of it works. It goes between different guitar tones. It noodles for just ever. It's slick. It's badass. It's technical. It goes in just all these different directions, all while maintaining this tone of the final track of the album, which is just this big fucking epic, dark, just evil sounding song. Like, this is a song with the lyrics, "If I had my way, I'd bash your face in the door," which is like what he says right before, like, just these like really gross vocal deliveries before ripping into this, which again, it's very Pink Floyd, but like it just goes on for so long and it's so cool. And when they play it live, this is the song that they do the 13-minute guitar solos on, or the 20-minute guitar solos and drum solos and everything. So yeah, the song was built to be like the giant guitar solo song because, Claudio wanted to be able to shred and go crazy, and he fucking succeeded. It's the coolest guitar solo I've ever fucking heard. I think there's Talkbox on there too. I don't know if that's just in the live version or if that's on the album, but there's also Talkbox use on there. It's dope shit, man. it's hard to talk about guitar solos. That's what I learned making this video. But anyways, I have a playlist of all these songs down in the description in one playlist, so check that out if you want to hear some dope-ass guitar solos, particularly some sad, emotional ones, with very few exceptions. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.